Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates and today we're going to look at prepping our design. So we'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. Well, first off, we'll look at exactly what I mean by prepping. Then we'll examine our layout PSD and think about the possibilities where images and CSS are concerned. Then, before we jump into the next video, I'll leave you with an assignment. Well, as we're rounding off our design phase, this really is a quick part of the process. In days gone by, when CSS was in the early stages of implementation and designers weren't used to controlling it anyway, websites were constructed with tables. If you're not sure what I mean, I'm certainly not going to drag that story from its grave. Needless to say, it was an horrendous workflow of chopping up tiny bitmap images and using them to decorate and form complex table layouts. Almost every inch of a PSD design required slicing and saving in order to build a web page. Now this made building a design for the web difficult and drawn out, plus altering a design an absolute nightmare. Take a look at this quick example. Yes, there are still examples out there. This is Qualiteam, which is the support team for Xcart e-commerce solution, actually, which is pretty horrendous that I should find this example on their site. Now I'm in Chrome here, so if I just right click and open my element inspector, you can see here that this whole region is built up of table rows and cells filled with tiny little images everywhere. It's awful. And this is typical of how websites used to be built. Thankfully, those days are gone, so we'll just get rid of that. Now with modern techniques, much of what you design in Photoshop can be recreated with CSS alone. Drop shadows, rounded corners, texture backgrounds, to name but a few examples, all help to speed up build time, page load time, and editing time. Of course, older browsers are still in use, so by using modern CSS techniques, you'll have to include fallback options if you want those browsers to render your website correctly. We can compromise, however, and it's therefore up to us to decide which elements of our design can be recreated with CSS and which we'll rely on images for. So let's refer back to our design and analyze how we could prep things. So we'll open up our PSD there. It should be looking very familiar to you by now. Now firstly, there's the background. Our footer is a solid color, so that can be defined with a simple CSS rule. The background texture of the upper section and the darker version of the contact area, they all need to be saved as two small tiles which will repeat across the page. Now there's also the logo. That will of course have to be an image. Then we have the large call to action button, and that can be recreated without too much difficulty with CSS. A simple red square with completely rounded corners and a slight transparency, plus the symbol used for the arrow, that's all doable. But Internet Explorer can only handle those properties from version 9 onwards. Unless we're prepared to consider a fallback technique, we'll probably have to settle with a straightforward image for this whole thing. Actually, the image itself could be our fallback if we use it only for Internet Explorer 8 or earlier. Our staff images, these thumbnails here, these will be images of course, and the fonts, they will be dealt with web fonts from Google, as we've already discussed. Our map here, that will be provided by a JavaScript snippet from Google Maps, and the send button background along with the three social buttons, they can be, just as with the call to action, built largely with CSS unless we opt to go for images. Now one advantage of using CSS, for example, would be that we could very quickly change the background colors without having to edit and resave any images. Okay, it's time for some further reading, so we'll jump back into our presentation. Now there are several tutorials on web design tuts which discuss the merits of CSS over Photoshop where certain things are concerned, but this series does so very thoroughly. Take a look, and these tutorials will help you work out what can be done in CSS3, which we've traditionally relied on graphics programs for. Now before we jump into the next video, I'd like you to go over our document again and decide for yourself which elements you think would be appropriate for building using CSS and which we should rely on images for. Next time on the 30 days to your first website design, we're going to take this step a bit further and look at CSS sprite sheets. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching.